You can keep on eating if you want. Yeah, it's okay. All right. This is Pat McPherson. We're sitting here today in Brattleboro, Vermont, at Susan Creighton's home. It's March 19th, 2023, and we are interviewing Rhett Krause. The interview is going to be part of the Marlboro Morris Ale Archive, which will reside at the Vermont Folklife Center in Vermont. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm looking forward to this.
Yay.
We are too.
I'm looking at my phone because all the the little email I sent you with the questions are here. Do you have the questions written out?
I do indeed, right in front of me.
Do you mind if... Oh, those are your notes. Okay. I'll just start, not exactly at the top, but your name has been associated with rapper dancing and Morris dancing, many Morris teams for a long time, as well as your name being associated with a lot of research you've done and published about Morris dancing, step dancing. So I'm curious, we're curious, and the archive is curious about how you first found out about Morris dancing and what.
Sure. So
how are you in?
So I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, and there was an early active contra dance there. I don't know if it's still going on. And we had, as probably most people do, you have a bunch of guy friends and a bunch of girl friends that collectively hang out together. And we discovered the contra dance there. And what we didn't know was that an English master rapper dancer had moved a few towns away. And he asked around and said, are there a bunch of young people I could teach Morris and Sword to? And that ended up being us. That was Tony Poyle. So the boys did the rapper, and the girls did the Morris. And that was a great thing and a wonderful thing in high school. I absolutely loved it. The only people from those times that are still associated would be Erin Hayden and Martha Nolan, is her married name, on Rock Creek. And then in 1977, we heard about this thing called the Marlboro Morris Ale, and they were going to have their second one, and we were very excited.
Were you invited?
Well, that's interesting. No, in a way, because at that time, Morris was seasonal. Marlboro thought that rapper was seasonal, and rapper was in the winter and had no business doing anything in the spring. So sword teams weren't invited for several years. And that's something else we can talk about, how that changed. But so we had to quickly learn Morris and invent almost a phony Morris team called the Putnam Ring, just enough so we could get invited, and we could go there as a rapper team and enjoy being there. And the girls also came up. One of the Martha, as a 17-year-old or whatever, called Tony Barron on the phone and demanded that her teenage girls be invited to the ale too, and which is a pretty gutsy thing for her to do, and she did it. So we all went up together. The girls team was a Burgundy Bells. A one-year team, and just like us, the Putnam Ring was kind of a faux Morris team just to get the rapper team up there.
So Putnam Ring is not a Cotswold team.
It was because that's all that was invited. We ended up doing a rapper performance there informally, which I can talk about at some point. But that was how we got to the ale.
I see. Okay.
You can talk
1977.
Yeah, you can talk about your experience there as teens. You were in high school.
Yeah.
Were you the youngest people there, other than
No? Dudley Loftman brought a bunch of teenagers students much younger than we were there. Morris Miners, I think they were called, from Canterbury, New Hampshire.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. And then the whole ale was just much younger to begin with, and I don't even know where to start with these things, whether it's 1977 or ale in general, but how would you like to go? Where would you like to
Just
go?
keep on talking about it.
Okay, so we loved every bit of the ale. It was magical, boys and girls. It just blew us away. It was just so wonderful. And for us, for the guys, the crowning thing was we were a rapper team. We danced for a few years, but rapper was so rare, we had actually never seen rapper. We'd never seen a single rapper dance. We'd only been in them. And Muddy River was in a similar situation. They came as a women's team, a Morris team, but they had a rapper side too. And they danced first informally in the evening, and we got a kick out of that because we'd never seen it before. It was actually monumental because that was kind of the big introduction of women in rapper, or women's rapper team. They were essentially the first. And then we went up the next night, and the thing for us was that we thought, well, we were a bunch of phonies. These guys who have been doing Morris for years, and who were we to come up? We asked Tony Poyle, are we good enough to even show up there? Are we going to embarrass ourselves? And we did it a rapper at night, and it went very well. And we ran outside from the music hall, and I'll never forget the moment. A minute later, people came open the door and said, come back in, come back in. And we came back in, and there was a standing ovation still going on.
Wow.
And we just could not believe it any fathomable way. We thought we were the worst people coming up there, that we were the posers, and we ended up being a hit. It was just that and one other show in 1984 with the same team. Those are the biggest dance highs I've ever had in my life. Those times where you look at the guys who, celebrating the Super Bowl, the World Series, and you see that absolute joy and the euphoria, saying we did it, and those are the things. Those are the two biggest dance moments I've ever had in my life. And that was the first one there. It really helped took us all in Marlboro.
Oh. Ask a question?
Can I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what did you call yourselves?
That was the rapper team was called the Greenwich Guard.
Greenwich Guard.
Greenwich Guard. We existed as a high school team, took 5 years off, and came back as a young adult team.
Same people? Different people?
A couple of the same, but medium new people also. Yeah.
In Greenwich still.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how Tony could convey to you guys the essence of what a rapper dance should look like and feel like if you'd never seen one before. And here he is, this master rapper teacher, so he's going to have high standards for how you look before he's going to take you to an ale. So how did
he didn't even take it, but he had the philosophy, which I think I see the wisdom of. He started us off and then let us go on our own. So by the time I joined the team, I wasn't an original member. I almost never saw him. We were self-run. His style was from the north of England. It was different than done in a lot of England. It was very similar to what the Monks Eaton team was. We didn't know that. We'd never heard that name. And we just thought this was what rapper was, and there was one way to do it. And it turns out there are a lot of ways. So we just had, we're doing rapper. This is how it's done. And we didn't know.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Who were the original members?
The people who came up that year in 1977?
Yeah.
Okay. In order, I'm trying to go around a set. Whitson, Kendall like Kendall Gill. Mm-hmm. Martin Hilliard. Myself.
You were number 3.
Yes. Then there was Chuck Menoher, Menoher. And, no, I'm sorry, Chuck was the fool. There was Paul Davis was number 4. Mm-hmm. And Andreas Sadin, who became a wonderful teacher later. Oh. And Chuck Menoher was our Betty.
You talk about fooling.
I think everybody but myself and Andreas dropped out after this. Or no, Chuck stuck out a few more years. Yeah.
If they hadn't caught the bug or what? They just moved on?
They moved on to other things in their life. And Andreas and Chuck and I were involved later.
And how,
by the way, I was the reason I was there was that Aaron Hayden was a year older than the rest of us, and he graduated, and I was his replacement.
Oh,
so that's how I was the new Aaron, And Aaron was off in college during the sale.
Went to college. Oh, interesting. What appealed to you about Rapper?
Oh my gosh. Rapper and teenage boys, I mean, what a natural match. I mean, it's just it's so much fun and so much exciting. Much more so than we saw Morris or Contra, everything. And when I saw that team go, I said, I want to be like them. I want to be like them. And then when Aaron graduated and they were looking for somebody to choose me, I was, over the moon.
They chose you from how? Like from
Because they knew me socially and knew me at the dances.
Okay.
They thought it'd be a good fit, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. And that little thing, it was amazing how it influences your life many decades later. That one little thing.
I know.
So
Right.
that's
What if
what
they never invited you.
exactly.
Would you have?
I could be playing golf or something awful like that. I'm sorry. I'm saying that to a Scottish person.
Really? So offensive. So between 1977 and 1984, what filled your life?
We all went off to college, and by that time I was on Marlboro. So, should I say how I got into Marlboro?
Yeah.
So a year later, after that, I was at a contra dance in Amherst because I went to college in Amherst, and Bonnie Blair, the Marlboro woman, was going down the contra line. She says, "You were one of those rapper dancers last year," and she says, "I'm going to talk to Tony." And she called Tony, and whatever impression that we made in 1977 was enough that he invited me on a team, and I started on a team in the fall of. Would that have been 79 or the fall 78, I guess. So I was dancing at the 79 Ale then, yeah.
On
the Marlboro Morris Men. On Marlboro Morris and Sword, the subset being the Marlboro Morris Men. It's not always understood. Marlboro Morris and Sword was half male for 10 years.
Right.
Gets into political minutiae, but
I know. Were you still dancing Morris? I mean, Rapper then?
No, there was 5 years off in college. No, we all went, we all went our separate ways, and I went off to England for a year. It was 5 years. Then we were all back home, and we were at a contra dance and said, "Let's start again," and we did.
Awesome. Where are we? How you got involved? The teens to the ale. After
And
that,
early Marlboro Morris and Sword, maybe.
yeah.
Oh, and the Great Schism and all that?
Yeah, talk about that from your perspective.
Well, I guess the first thing is that when I think back at it, I don't know how I can convey how absolutely devoted and fanatical, is that the name? Just love the team, love the ale. It was such a huge part of our lives, my life. And I'm almost to an embarrassing degree, and I'm thinking, was it something that Tony and Andy then created? Was it because of the age I was in, or was it something special at the time? I don't know. And I don't know if people feel that way still, but just that wonderful sense of the community, and you wouldn't dare miss a practice. You'd drive through stupid driving through ice storms and snowstorms. You wouldn't dare miss a practice, and how much it meant, and the event, and I'd just drive home from the event, and I wouldn't have told anybody until recently, just like tears in my eyes of just happiness and joy and how wonderful it was, and it's just spectacular. It was also new and everything. And then that was for that existed like that for 10 years, and then I had a year off where I was a medical intern and I couldn't do anything, and it all fell apart when I was gone, and I couldn't believe it. Yeah, it was,
What fell apart?
Oh, that was
the team had a big schism, and that and that the at least half of the men's team took off to create a new team down in Massachusetts, and and to me, the men and the women they'd each taken this under dance tradition and developed it beautifully. The men, it was Litchfield, and everything was going great, and maybe things were not going to go right. Tony was going to move to Boston. He wasn't going to be able to move because he'd be he wasn't going to be able to run it every year. He was going to step down as Squire. Maybe his health was just starting to fade, and maybe things would have changed anyway. But to have it just destroyed like that, when I wasn't there for it, it was just unfathomable. So unspeakably sad. to me.
It's
That
like
big,
having the rug
something
pulled out from
lost,
under you.
this huge loss. I think, guys, what? What are you doing? And I've heard, I've heard different stories from different perspectives, and it's interesting because they're different and they change about what happened there. And I don't know, should I mention anything more of that?
It's up to you.
Well, just some of the guys, say, why did you do this stupid thing? And
You mean go off?
yeah, why break up this? This is Camelot. Why destroy it? And part of it was the people there. Marlboro, Tony and Andy really wanted to be local and based in the community, and that was a bit of a fib because we were also the only team. They created something so attractive. We were the only team anywhere where people from 5 states would drive to practice every day. Of course, it's the only location in the country where that could possibly happen. 5, so it's not quite all local.
Little states.
Yeah.
Yeah. But still.
Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut. That was me part time, and New York. Yeah.
Wow.
So some of the guys were the guys who had no kids at home, mostly single. They couldn't understand why this team was so boring. Wanting to spend time with their little kids and do local dances at local people's homes. And they just wanted to go to all the ales and party and have fun and, strut their stuff. And the rest of the team wasn't having it. And that's what they told me was a big reason they stepped away. And
So which group ended up in Massachusetts? The young guys?
the young guy, the breakaway group, who didn't have a name at that point.
And what did they become?
Well, then there's a story they got named is... it's only known to 3 people in the world, and one of them's gone now, and so it's only Andy and I. And so they showed up the next year without an official name, and they were strutting themselves. They were strutting their stuff and putting on a really good show. They were, they were trying to be the swaggering macho guys with it. They picked what they thought was a macho tradition. This what you call a old spot version of Longbarrow, which is really hard to do unless you're 25 and really fit or whatever. So they were coming on and they're all full of themselves, and they called themselves we are Los Conquistadores, and so at the morning stand on a Saturday, I happened to be standing next to Andy, and Will Fielding came up. Will leading that team, and Andy said. And he said, well, you guys don't have a name. What do we introduce yourselves as? And Will said, I don't know. He says, why don't you just call us the Marlboro Morris Men? And he choked and said, well, okay. And she introduced them as the Marlboro Morris Men. So that was, the name was sort of like this offhand joke as far as I could tell from Will, and it stuck.
Oh my.
And they were the Marlboro Morris Men then. And so if you see the tape, here we are, Los Conquistadores, and they're but they're introduced as the Marlboro Morris Men. And I think if you ask Andy, she should be able to remember that. So,
I always wondered why they ended up with that name.
right, because to me they were not only they were in a different state, different kit, different tradition, different everything, and not to mention it was like rubbing. What Billy Crystal says, it was, why don't you give me a paper cut and rub salt in it while you're at it? It was like the name. So there, and I was like, oh God, of all the names you picked, you destroyed this. Now you're taking name. And of course, what can you say? Most of the guys down there are tons of people in Western Mass waiting to join a team. There's wonderful people like Steve Howe and Aaron Hayden and some guy named Doug Creighton and I love those guys, and they all joined, and I can't blame them, and there's no personal animosity. It was a sense of loss for me from what had been. That was a thing.
Who else was on that group, that breakaway group?
Well, two of the lead rebels, if you will, were Alex Nahr and Will Fielding, and I mentioned them first because the irony is that after a couple of years they came back, and what happened later, and Fred DeBecca.
Oh, yeah.
Steve, Steve Adams, Tim Cavanaugh. A lot of the best dancers on the team. Didn't leave Marlboro with enough to feel aside.
Oh.
For another few years, and there's another story there. But
So you were last. You didn't join them.
I did later on, because like I said, they're a great bunch of guys, and they're very local.
Yeah.
And I joined, and that was fine, but I just felt like even if I wanted to, I just couldn't join them those first couple of years. It was a sense of loss.
So who was left up here?
I think of the rump. So the rump of us left are just local guys, and a few years nothing happened, and after a gap of, I don't know, it would be something like 3 years, they said, I think Tony said, let's go out there again. And this is a team called the Marlboro Classics.
Okay.
It was, we knew it was a dead end because we only practiced a few times before the ale. We didn't tour, we didn't practice all the time. There were no new people. We knew that we were never going to be as good as we were. And we were just going to run into the ground for as long as it lasted for fun. And it lasted a surprising time. I think it was like 7 or 8 years. And we were actually good, no longer great, but decent and solid, and it was fun. And I don't know if the young people wouldn't know, but the advertising campaign for Coca-Cola was they got rid of Coca-Cola for a new Coke.
Yeah.
And people rejected it and says, no, we want, and for a while,
Classic.
For a while they tried to bring back Coke Classic, and so we were the Marlboro Classics. The idea, So there was a lot. There's good-natured theater feuding between the teams for the name, and that's why, like, one time, this is for the archives, I had this shirt made up. Did you ever see this?
No.
So it says, I'll read it for the people, our listening audience. It says, Marlboro Morris Men, Marlboro, Vermont. Ask for them by name, accept no substitutes. That was sort of a dig at the Amherst team, who were all my buddies, but it was still,
right.
a dig. And that became a big part of the theater of that year. If you were strutting around with that shirt or saying Fred DeBecco stole the shirt and Tony stole it back, and it was just fun. And then that year, the Amherst team said we were going to have a tug of war at the feast for the naming rights of the team. We got into it, and it was a lot of chest thumping and theater, and it's all great dance theater and fun. So we got there, and we were all going to win, and as the tug of wars go, they go back and forth, and the whole crowd's cheering for one side or the other. And Alex Nahr would come back. He was probably our strongest person. He wasn't there. We're saying, "Where's Alex? Where's Alex?" And then at the very end, he appears on the other team, the Amherst team, and he shoves them from behind. And they collapse and later on he says, well, it's a tug of war. Nobody said that which side we had to be on, did we? And we thought that was hysterical. It was funny. And it turned out that it was all, we didn't know it, but it was set up. There was an olive branch from Amherst. They set up the tug of war, and they were going to deliberately lose and let us have it anyway. It was a good-natured olive branch thing. No, and just as Alex pushed was the time that they decided that they were going to let us win. And so I don't know if Alex had actually had any effect on it, but it was hysterical. It was funny. Everybody laughed and had a good time with it. And it kind of broke a little bit of ice. And I joined that team, and I danced for them for a few years afterwards. And nice guys. And good
so
time.
did Classic kind of fade away?
Sure. It was a dead end from the beginning. We weren't taking anybody new. We were missing a lot of our best dancers. We were only going to be so good and generally fade. So, but we rode that wave as long as we could.
Yeah. So who was on Marlboro Classics? I know we have.
Well, Tony was dancing.
Wow.
And then he was still dancing, and Will Fielding had come back, and Alex Nahr. I'm blanking on.
I might have a picture.
Yeah, we have pictures, I think.
Dave Sullivan, and Dave Sullivan brought his teenage son, who is going to be, if odds hold up, will be the last surviving Marlboro Morris man.
What was his name?
From Vermont. I can't remember David's. Daniel, thank you. And he was the only new person ever, and I can't remember who else.
Yeah.
Oh, Steve I'm sorry, Steve Mandel, of course.
Oh, okay.
And Jonathan Morris, yeah.
Were you like in your 30s by then?
I think so, probably. Yeah.
Isn't it kind of interesting to find that this thing you love and you're in your 30s and you're already feeling like you're going downhill a little bit from the apex, the moments when it was most beautiful and fun. It's like a gymnast,
Right. And I guess the only other thing that goes on from that is that what's very meaningful to me and other teams is that Will Fielding came back in his last years, including the year he was dying of cancer. He taught the Litchfield in the Marlboro style to the Wyndham, the local team there, Wyndham. And that was actually to see Litchfield dance in that way, the same dances that we had invented back in that same county. So I look at Wyndham, I see a continuity there much more than I see at the Marlboro Morris Men from Massachusetts.
And Wyndham is Putney? Is that?
Are they in Putney? Are they in
Wyndham
Putney? I'm not sure. I'm not sure where they practice. But they've got that continuity of the dance that Will Fielding had taught from the old Marlboro Man.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't want to confuse Wyndham Morris Men with Putney Morris Men.
No,
who are
no,
two
not at all.
separate teams.
Oh, okay.
He's talking about Wyndham Morris Men.
Yeah.
In Brattleboro. The Brattleboro?
No, they're Wyndham County. They're
Wyndham
Southern
County.
Vermont.
I don't know where they
I
practice.
don't know where their base is, but yeah,
And they still exist.
Yeah.
very much so.
Awesome.
My goodness, we spent a lot of time on this thing, but that's
Yeah,
fine. I love it. That's it.
Yeah. As a
Why we
historian,
love talking to you.
as a historian, you should appreciate history at the ale, teens at the ale, how you got into it. You've told us a lot. What's next on what's next on your trajectory? I mean, things.
Well, I guess there's a couple of things that go from there. Is that the early ale and how it's changed, and then youth rapper again, and
because
those
your
are kind of
history
things
is
old.
as long as anyone's. From 1977.
Mm-hmm.
You saw a lot of changes.
Yeah.
What is that?
Notes for you.
Yeah, eventually.
Sure.
Yeah. You want to just reflect on
Some early memories. Like,
Yeah. I
And
know
then-
your early memories are sort of in a cloud of, oh my God,
Yeah.
that was incredible.
well, I see. How are some early things that wouldn't be appreciated now, and how did things change?
Yeah.
So 1977, for the first 2 and maybe 3 years of the ale, we didn't camp where you are now. We camped on what is now a not very attractive looking leach field for the college sewage system.
Kind of down the hill.
Yeah, exactly. On a sloping hill. But the thing is, you camped there. You woke up. It's also, if you wake up and you don't look toward the college, you got 270 degrees of just picture perfect Vermont mountains, and it's just gorgeous to wake up for. And the whole atmosphere, everything was new, everything was young. It was very counterculture. Now, I'm not a counterculture person, but it was very much the hippie thing to do. And we wake up there and look around and cooking breakfast, and then I remember somebody brings out a fiddle, and there's this barefoot contra dance starting at breakfast, and they're surrounded by the mountain. I said, this is just magical. This is wonderful. And that was also the year where here's another little anecdote. The year the ale almost ended. You can't see it now, but there's a little parking, because they've bulldozed things differently. But there is a tiny parking lot, 1 car deep on top of the hill. And it sloped extremely steeply down, like 45 degrees or about 15 feet to the campground. And at night, somebody left a car in neutral. And it got loose, and it was responding to gravity. And we woke up the next morning, and there is this car at a 45-degree angle halfway down that steep hill with one rock just big enough to stop a car there. And without that car would have gone at a good rate of clip, would have mowed right through all the tents. And that would have been the end of the ale. As it was wow, and then it was kind of funny, and I actually took a picture of it. But I was thinking, whew.
Wow.
Who would have thought? Here we are in this beautiful scenery, and we didn't know we just missed the disaster. And
That's how it works.
yeah. So,
What was that?
1977.
Oh,
Wow.
I don't, and it goes, I don't think Marlboro women weren't camping, so I don't think they even know that story. I don't think hardly anybody knows that, but it was very real. So anyway, it was a very youthful, young. Well, it was new in a way it can never be new again, and it was youthful in a way that probably will never happen again. And so, I guess one of the probably like 35-year-old former teams from Boston told me once, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Well, we know in your day it was all like free love and crazy." And I said, "Really?" And I said, "What?" I said, "No, it wasn't. It was just the difference was that it was just a bunch of single people in their 20s and 30s just acting like 20 people single in 20s and 30s always do it, and going up pine woods. And then it wasn't anything different that way, but it was the young age. So should I go on with age? No. So one of the first things you notice in the ale has aged and continues to age, just like CDSS and Pine Woods and J4 and English Week have aged distressingly. And the first sign of that was the change in Mondays, because Mondays used to be a full day at the ale. And what they would do, they would have the Marlboro Olympic Games. They would have welly wanging and leg wrestling and butt wrestling and other common things like sack racing and wheelbarrow racing, and everybody having a great time. And then
some photos of some of that. It took
Yeah.
us a while to understand what we were seeing. Yeah.
Now we know.
it was the Olympic
Olympics.
Games. Yeah.
It was the Olympics, right?
And then we would all go off to Pancho's Rec in Wilmington, a Mexican restaurant. We'd dance, and then it would conclude with something called a Saturday night, which is this dance that can go on. You're in couples, and you dance with every other couple.
Right.
It's like 30 seconds with each couple, but there could be, I'd say about 2/3 of the ale went there. And you could dance. It was a marathon dance, over and over, repetition, absolutely exhausting. And you'd finish it, sweaty and covered, but exhausted and not want, you're done with dancing, you're worn out, and then you go in and pig out on beer and Mexican food. And that was, and the first scenes of age were in the late 80s, when people started distressingly growing up and saying, oh, yeah, I think I'm going to go home after breakfast to Boston because I got so much ready to get ready for work tomorrow. And I remember I heard that from, I remember hearing that from Kathy Ty, who was one of the big partiers at the time. I said, no, don't grow up, Kathy.
I know.
Don't grow up. It says you got to go to Pancho's. And then Monday was never revised. That was the first sign, and the ale kept getting a little older until we got to, I guess, the next big thing. I'm jumping around a little, but the next big thing would be trying to reintroduce teens to it, and that would have been about roughly 2002, 2003.
Reintroducing teens?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
So after you were there in 1977,
Nope.
that was an exception to an unspoken rule or a
Well,
real
there
rule?
weren't any rules first 2 years. They were making it up, and then there were no teen teams around anyway. And that became that was a big. Should I just? Because that's
Yes.
not. I'm jumping around time wise, but it's the
It's
same.
fine.
So roughly 2002. I don't know. Tom Kruskal started up Great Meadows, and meanwhile, teen teams have also started in Dartmouth area in New Hampshire. Chris Levy and
Right.
Jane, yeah, and I'm by this time I'm on the ale committee, and the thing is, do we have teens there or not? And the arguments against them are, teen behavior, adult predators, if you will, alcohol-related issues, the semi-public showers, the fear that just one middle-aged guy stepping out of the shower, shall we say, prematurely, in front of one 15-year-old girl who tells her mother, and then that's the end of that. And all these things we were scared of, and there's a I would say about half the committee said, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to watch my behavior. We want to be able to drink and curse and fart with our friends and have a good time. And it's and I understand they didn't want to go through the energy of that, and I understood that. But from my point of view, they were saying like, après moi le déluge. It's we're going to party, but it's going to be the death of it, and as it just gets older. And certainly Aaron, who was also on the committee by then, and I, having these great memories of what it's like to be there, and you can take some of these teens and you can hook them for life and bring this new age and this new generation into it. That was the overriding thing. So he and I were very big advocates of bringing the teens back, and we worked with Tom Kruskal on that. Some of the things were, Tom was, he clearly read them the Riot Act, a teenagers from Boston. He said, your behavior at this ale and the next one is going to determine the future of teens at the ale. So he said he's going to have a very short stick of, sending somebody something packing with any indiscretion. And he over the years he did that a few times, and they were very well behaved. And then we were worried. I remember we took people it was like, now we think of Erica and Jillian, and we were so petrified with the girls in the bathrooms. They're saying, okay, we're gonna rope off the shower, and you have full use of this for these hours, and this or this, and tell us when you're going to use it. We'll post the guard outside there. And they laughed at us for being paternalistic. Said, "Oh, come on, come on, don't treat us like this. I mean, we're 16, we're grown ups," and and then we said, "Oh, okay." And then the first year they did put them they ghettoized them in the dining hall. They had to sit at certain tables where there was no table wine or no anything. And I thought that was a little belittling, and that only lasted a year or two. But anyway, but I think I think the teens were a great success. And I'm looking now at some of them who joined the committee and having the teens being a regular expectation here. And I think it's been great. Tom's done more than any single person for bringing young people into the dance world, and we can encourage them because it's not just being on a team, but going to these memorable events and being part of it, and being a hit, and watching people like Natty, Erica, Jillian, Jeremy Carter Gordon, and you realize shine at the Ale, and it was great to give them that opportunity. I'd like to think that maybe that helped a little bit in them pursuing it the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and you have to spread the seed pretty widely in order. It's only going to germinate in a few people. Your high school team faded away, never came back. But 3 or 4 of you, yes, we're going to continue it because it is that important to me.
It's an investment. And so I think the Marlboro Ale and Rapper is aged less than everything else in the general community. Mm-hmm. Partly because of that. It was very important because you stop bringing in youth and you put a timeline on the end of what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think CDS is very much struggling with that. And probably Scottish dancing too.
Talk about that.
So
it's interesting. Yeah. Sometimes it takes off. Sometimes it comes around to the young people again, and all of a sudden it's cool. But then there was why was it fallow for 10 years, and why is it now taking?
But you also attract your peers, and you realize that if your teams are a bunch of people in their 50s and 60s, what teenager is going to join that? How is that possibly cool? You get a teenage team, then you get and teenage teams in the plural, they reinforce each other, they have a good time together, and then it is cool again. Yeah. It still seems like a losing battle because we're aging every year, but less so than, like J4 in English Week.
True.
Yeah.
So true. You mentioned that by that time you and Aaron were on the Ale committee. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about why you decided to do that and a little bit about your time on the committee?
Okay, sure. So in a nutshell, the men and women of Marlboro Morris and Sword ran it for 10 years. Then the men's team folded, as I mentioned, for the next 10 years. The women ran it with the Marlboro team from Massachusetts as labor, if you will. Mm-hmm. They weren't officially running it or inviting, but they were necessary for doing all the hard work. After that, the women said they didn't want to do it anymore. They said they were done, and they had no succession planning at all. So this Ale committee was formed from a mixture of people, and I didn't join for the first year or two, and then I joined, and it was a part of being part of this thing that I involved in this thing that was very meaningful to me, and especially after I gave up dancing, a way to keep being part of it. Mm. And anyway, that's why I joined.
So the Ale committee was formed in
after 20 years. So would that be
96?
I think 95, 90, exactly. I think after literally 20, it was 10 years, and then the Ale committee. Yeah.
So doing some quick math, you've been on the Ale committee in the neighborhood of 25 years.
Yeah, a little because I wasn't on it for 2 years, the first 2 years.
Right.
And I think, and just a small thing, you talk about changes to the Ale. I remember from early on the Ale committee, Dan Popowich had the idea of serving breakfast. And that changed the scene in the mornings because we were always on the campground and that was another one of those, closely fought arguments. And ultimately ended up being right. I was against it at first, but yeah, it was great.
Isn't it so interesting?
Yeah, but it was his idea, and I give him full credit for pushing it and developing it. And now we take it for granted, but that's how that changed.
People are so, in some ways, the more passionate they are about something, the more resistant they are to change.
Yes.
Because you hold this picture inside
This is my
yourself.
way. Yeah.
This is what makes it perfect as itself. No, you can't change it.
And and I think for me that thing about teens was, to me, my introduction, it was a teens. That was the history of it. And for a lot of half the rest of it wasn't. It was all of them coming, their friends coming as adults and not seeing it as anything else. And so it's interesting. You have these 50-50 splits and you come to a decision, and usually it's been right. They've been right.
Yeah. And what has your role been on the committee?
Mostly two things. I've done financial. And I've been, because the year I was in England for a year, I had a lot of connections, and I've been in touch of bringing English teams over.
Right.
Yeah. So those are kind of the things I do.
What about, go ahead.
I'd like to ask about bringing English teams over. So have you been, I've thought of you certainly as the liaison person between English teams and the ale. Was it the kind of thing where English teams had heard about the ale and were coming to you and saying, can we come? Or were you sort of seeking out teams saying, oh, it would be really nice if we could get this team over. I'll start talking to them now to see if they can get them over.
Well, the first thing this team came over for 2 or 3 times with Windsor Women, and I had nothing to do with that. That was well before I had any say in anything. After that, it's been mostly the teams hearing about us from one connection or another, and I've been a contact person with Eric, so I would know people personally on the teams, and we email and message back and forth and work out the details. Yeah, so mostly self-invited teams. They'd say, hey, we want to come, what year is available? And that's still how it's been.
I was going to ask, how much lead time do they usually need to get them over here?
You can't. We decide on people in the fall domestically, but that's too early. The English teams need at least a year or more to get going.
Because financially, what's the situation?
They pay the full way. They're given free rooms, which everybody else pays for, and part of it is we also before and after we hook them up with people in Boston or wherever in Amherst, so that hopefully part of their trip they never have to pay a rental for a hotel or anything. No, and they'll get a lot of their food and boarding from other people. Makes it work financially for everybody.
That's part of talking to Beth Neal from Windsor, is that the people that she was billeted with in the first time Windsor came over are lifelong friends.
Yeah, sure,
now.
Sure.
So providing that extra service to them was
crucial. Beth and I are like long-term. I mean, I've always been in contact with her. So, but where was I going to go with that? Lost a thought there somewhere.
No, keep going.
I can't. I lost it.
Well, do you want to talk about some of the innovations you have made yourself at the ale? For instance, there's this thing called Aunt Sally.
Okay, sure.
Like, how did you find out about it? Sure. Why did you think it would be a good thing?
Well, I've always had a fondness for tall tales, practical jokes, and frauds, and a few of them have played out at the ale. And this is a little bit exaggeration, a little bit. So Aunt Sally, there was an old version that was actually international around mid-19th century, the Civil War time. It was an international fad throughout all the English-speaking areas, including America, especially England.
Wow.
And this new version that we play now probably came out maybe the 1920s. But anyway, now it's almost unheard of. Most people in England have never heard of it. It's confined to this almost no more than Oxfordshire. It's an obscure pub game. It is almost an identical geographic relationship with the traditional Cotswold Morris. So to us, we go over there as Morris tourists. We see Morris dancing, we see Aunt Sally, and we link them in our minds. In England, there's no such link at all. If you get an Aunt Sally league, like a bowling league over here, they would be absolutely appalled to think that we consider them associated with Morris dancing. They have nothing to do with it at all. But it's just geographical coincidence that they're in the exact same place. So I had seen it in 81. I bought a set in 86 and brought it back. And two things struck me funny. When I was there in 81, one pub was having an Aunt Sally 24-hour Aunt Sally marathon for charity in the middle of the winter to be played in your underwear. And, which I thought was wonderful. And underwear, you can imagine, this is England. And so this would be full long johns and everything, and nobody there can remember this. They all think I'm making it up, but it's true. So and then the other thing that put it in my mind, a little town in rural Canada, down on its luck, advertised and held the rock, scissors, paper world championship. And they actually did a success. So it was a tiny little town. I don't know, in rural Canada. I don't know what it is.
You can't remember the name.
No. And so between these, I think the Aunt Sally Marathon, it stuck Aunt Sally in my mind with humor and exaggeration and fraud like that. So that year, Atterbury, a traditional team from Aunt Sally territory, Cotswold Morris was coming over. And I said, let's have the world championship and a full world championship. And so I remember Ted Sulis of the Marlboro Men in Massachusetts saying, okay, so I'm playing for a world championship in 3 weeks. I've never even heard of this thing. And nobody had heard of it. And I'm sure Doug was on that team, Doug Creighton. And yeah, so we just, drummed it up as a world championship. And Atterbury came out, because they didn't play Aunt Sally, and they really said, what? They were just bemused, puzzled. I don't know what they made for it. So it was a Marlboro. So I went to the committee. I said, the Marlboro Men, Massachusetts, are challenging Atterbury to a world championship, and this could be an annual event. Does the ale committee want anything to do with this? And they said, no. They said, this is too weird for us. It's never going to go anywhere. So you guys run with it. And that's why it's always been the province of the Marlboro Morris Men. It's Marlboro Morris Men against anybody they choose for the Aunt Sally World Championship. And hopefully we try to, because it's world, we try to get people from England, and Toronto's been great sports, men and women, from Canada when we tried to do that. And that's how it started. It was kind of a joke. But the other time, the second year, Ensham, another traditional team from Aunt Sally came over, and unlike Atterbury, they were really into it. They had a blast, and they won. And which is great. So they had a great time, and they went back talking about it. And the very next year, this actual true world championship of Aunt Sally started in a town right next to Ensham. And I can't imagine it's a coincidence, because first of all, this obscure pub game, to have a world championship, just the name World Championship is incredibly, it has this wonderful arrogance and humor in it. Yeah. And over there, so they have this really serious World Championship, and the guys are, everybody in America is terrible at it. Or our best guys over here would be like the worst people on the Bush League, pub team there. But we just, we're just having fun. They're serious about it. So they have a very serious world championship, and I like to think that they're doing it because of what
you may have sparked this.
I think the Marlboro Morris Ale did, because Atterbury and Ensham comes, and next year, right after that, they have a real serious world championship, and so it's a little way of unexpected transatlantic influence on culture. But.
I have heard that you wrote a book about this.
I did.
Oh, tell me about that.
Careful, because I'll talk about it for 300 pages or whatever long the book is.
Go for it.
No. Oh no, I know it's a stick throwing game. We've made it a lot of fun and theater, and people cheering, and when I was a referee, for instance, Toronto would drag up these. Well, we didn't know them. The old and fairly obscene chants how you insult the referee in a football match in England, and they would be chanting them loudly and singing them loudly. It's all great fun. And then other theater. Then Toronto women came out with one year wearing their skin tight purple sequined hot pants to challenge us, which was and they hosted us with. Formal cocktails, and then they came out dressed like, and everybody is whooping and hollering. And by this time, we're having it at night, in front of in the headlights, and it's just getting better and better. And then the Marlboro Men come out in these. I thought they resembled, the closest thing I knew to them. They look like one-piece high school wrestling outfits, but apparently they're actually a very gay male singleton thing that I didn't know about, and they came out quite anatomically correct in these outrageous scenes, and it was just hysterical. Everybody was people talked about that for years, and it was laughing. So it's all this theater building up, trying to have something special for each one, and all part of this thing of humor, fraud, exaggeration, and
yeah. Let's make something happen, he said.
That's right, exactly.
So in other words, I'm delighted that Aunt Sally is still going on. So.
That's wonderful. Any other things like that you made happen that I don't know about?
That I made happen? Me personally, I don't think so. There's the Aunt Sally art, which I don't know if you guys have this latest one. Did you? I'm not sure if you did. The Star Wars Aunt Sally.
We don't have this one.
Okay.
Well, I brought that up for you.
Wait a second.
And I had the Game of Thrones Aunt Sally poster, which I think you do have.
We do have that
which
one.
caught the Game of Thrones perfectly. And this is sorry, it's blowing in the breeze here. I can't keep it straight.
Gotcha.
Anyway, part of the, again, exaggerating, making, the announcements.
You're a
Did you
character.
get this poster?
Yeah, of course.
Excellent.
Wow.
Good. Okay, add it to the Aunt Sally.
And little things like, for instance, the naked wrecking ball, most Morris art pictures you see around. That's a story of another fraud of each, and now it's half a dozen different teams, like taking off, riffing on Molly Cyrus, swinging on her naked on a wrecking ball. Now, each Morris team, and 10% of their kit, and nothing else, with a background that says where they're from, and the one year where you're talking about while we're riffing on little fraudulent things, was he introduced that one of the sponsors of the ale was this place hippie place from northern Vermont, which was the only milking herd of Australian possums in America, Tasca's Possum Dairy, and so here this is the beer chits we're using. The reassured beer have Tasca's Possum Dairy on them.
Oh my goodness!
And I think you have a shirt from Tasca's
We
Possum.
do.
We have a
We
lot of
do.
Tasca's Possum
And I know
Dairy
I've
shirt.
seen bumper stickers.
And I'd say about half the people at the ale that year thought they were eating possum cheese, because we had labels printed, and we were having a possum cheese sampling, and so it's like I say, fraud, good natured.
Lovely.
And for this year, you're getting this year's beer chits are going to be along the fraudulent line. You probably can't see it, but this is what's a wild, beautiful symbol of the northern woods that everybody loves in Vermont is the loons. So this is a local loon jerky company. It's so bad.
It's
so bad and awful that it's funny. And as it says here on this other side, it says avoid these are non-GMO organic, wild caught, and avoid Canadian farm raised loons. So that's so anyway, that's a fraud in humor. So it goes along with some people. It hasn't always gone. So let me talk about humor, Dale. Should I give you this?
Yes.
So what are some of the funny things? Like one of the funny things was like ended up being like a disaster was the dead frog year. Do you know that?
No.
Oh yes.
This is the late 80s, Juggler Meadow. This is one of the weather events where we had a rainy day followed by a blistering hot sunny day, and flood followed by hot sun. And the flood had brought frogs out into the road where they promptly got flattened by cars.
Yeah.
And the sun baked them dry, and they were totally flat, wafer-thin frogs, dried as they were not smelly, not drippy. They were dried as like a coaster for a beer, like a drink. Yeah, dried. And Juggler Meadow Men are wild hippie guys there, and led by Cammy Kaner at the time. He was just the epitome of the wild and crazy Morris dancer. He's such a wonderful family man now. It's hard to imagine what he was back then. But they all they decorated their shirts with the dead frogs and pins, which I thought was hysterical, making a funny thing of this. And, oh man, it got held against them. other people didn't like it, and they still, is that Dead Frog guys? And it's just so unfortunate. I thought they had this wonderful sense of humor, but it did not go over with several of the group. So that was a shame. And that actually, I could segue for me into Newtown. Should I talk about Newtown?
Sure. Yes.
Everything's on the table, Rhett.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to go from one thread to another. It ties together, sort of. So humor. Yeah. Newtown was a dominant thing in the 80s. They would spend a massive amount of time bringing a new theme to the ale. One year it was outer space. One year it was Italian themed. One year it was 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they brought in the obelisk on the ale. So wonderful. And the two best years, I think, they had. How Cecil Sharp had been to Appalachia and discovered Morris dancing. Well, Newtown were coming as an obscure Appalachian team, lost in history. Down there, nobody had known that they had continued Cecil Sharp's traditions for 80 years, and they were just discovered. So they came up as the just outrageous hillbilly. There was Mitch Diamond, and he was coming in a union suit with a flap down her back and a blackened out tooth, and a gun over his shoulder. He was just playing it up. It was wonderful. I can't remember the name of that team.
Amble on down.
Or that might have been because the next year they came as they discovered the native team in England that had. That they were immigrants. They were immigrants from this team in England. They discovered a native team in England who I think were Amble on Down, and they were a bunch of heavily brain damaged Morris team because they were lead miners. And and they came over doing this terrible dance because they were brain damaged lead miners, and they were the team who had sent off their immigrants to Appalachia 100 years before, and it was hysterical. And if you get not only were they wonderful at it, but one of the most memorable dances that if you could ask anybody at that time, when Kathy Mason was doing her Morris jig as the Amble on Down women's auxiliary, she just brought down the house. It was so funny. It was so funny. So there was it's this exaggeration, this sense of humor that I love, and I love Newtown for it. And they were just such a big part of the ale, and they threw everything into it. And then they fell out of favor for some reason. I don't understand why. Oh, by the way, Mitch Diamond was a genius. And I mean, he wasn't the only one. I think Peter Masters were, but Mitch Diamond, he's the clown fool of Morris, is how I think of him.
Can we talk about fooling?
Yeah, and he wasn't there. So I'll just just finish this thought. Is that Newtown fell out of favor, and then one year, like 15 years later, they decided to come back as the old Newtown, and they brought a Scottish theme to the ale. And that included building an entire castle on the campground. And waking people up with bagpipes at 6 a.m. was another part of it. But so it was. They put in so much labor, effort, thought, and of course money into this, and it was a huge hit. The castle was packed with people late into the night, partying, and it was just wonderful. I just loved every bit of it, and it bombed to the committee. And it bombed with some because, well, part of it was because it was such a hit, but it was also the late night party where everybody was trying to sleep. And then they were trying to make a joke out of apologetically. The head of the committee was a known whiskey lover, whiskey aficionado, and they gave him they said to make up for it, they gave a speech. They gave him a bottle of the best whiskey. He didn't know it was coffee grounds and water, and they gave it to him out of a joke, and it didn't go over very well. And anyway, they couldn't win. They couldn't win for losing. They did this wonderful thing. I thought it was brilliant, but people didn't have the right humor for that, and I felt so sorry for them. It was a big hit at the time, but people were saying, "Oh, we can't have that again." So anyway, I've always had a fond spot for Newtown and all the effort they did. And I think what they used to do in the 80s, it's all been forgotten by the people who are under 40 or under 50 now. But I just love those guys and everything, that comic genius of Mitch. But anyway, that's where. So he's never really been a fool, but I think of him as having that wonderful humor.
Yeah.
So you said you want to talk about fooling, or?
the context for that kind of humor changed around it. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that you describe them doing would be offensive to so many people now.
Oh, Janet Scudder with a ring of garlic around her neck to go out to the crowd as a fool saying, "Manja, manja," as an Italian grandmother or something like that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But they weren't at that time. They weren't at that time. They
It
just
really
like that time.
changed, and you know,
Sure.
I understand them going out of favor. I don't understand the dead frogs being not accepted.
No, what's wrong with dead frogs?
What's wrong with
I
dead
think
frogs?
I ask every Marlboro woman, and I think they have a very negative view of that one. But anyway, I thought Cammie and Mitch, I love those guys and their humor.
So two things come to mind is one continuing on this theme of, you know, humor at the ale, and that ties into fooling. The other is that, you know, the hippies of the 70s became the gatekeepers, you know, and and they felt like they could say what was okay and what was not okay at an event that they were running. I guess that's legit.
Could be, yeah. Well, maybe it's part of being old. Maybe if they had the Scottish castle that partied all night in the early 80s, maybe it would have been a hit. And it wasn't when people were 25 years older.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah, but the nature, you know, like a free nature of creating a party and letting what happens happen is very different from having a committee. I mean, these things evolve, and you have to, you know, as there's more money, there's more commitment, there's like, I'm choosing to do this for a reason, and I expect to have this kind of experience. You know, all of that stuff happens when something gets codified.
And I think Newtown was invited for several years early on because we have to have them. Look what they do. And I think they're not invited for other years because look what they did. We can't have that.
So
Which I think is a shame.
Yeah. We have talked to people who have been fools and people who have an appreciation for fooling. So you said on your original team there was a fool, Chuck Menaher. Was that just happened organically, or did you you thought this is part of having a team and we must have one?
Absolutely. I mean, this is how the fooling and Rapper and Morris wasn't dropped in the ocean when it came over. It came over, and then it died. And I think it's been a big loss, and I'm not sure why it died. So yeah, when we were taught Rapper was a fooling. That was an intrinsic part of the dance, and the Betty, and became other things. Very intrinsic part of that. To this day, I think as good as it is, a rapper dance, a neat rapper dance, you know, meaning one without a fool. It's an incomplete dance. Also, people don't know what they're missing as good as they are. It really should be a part of it.
And that's what Tony Poyle taught.
Well, he just taught us. It wasn't any question. Just like there's stepping and in Rapper, there's this, and there's a Betty in Rapper. That's just how it is. There isn't. It's not like there's another option.
But you see it rarely now.
Very rarely in Rapper or Morris. When have you seen a fool under 40 in anything?
Are there still fools with rapper teams over in the UK?
Yeah, but it's different. It's a Tommy. It's a very different thing. It's the Tommy who, I don't mean this in a negative way because they have their own tradition there, but from our point of view, it's minimalist in that they're mostly there, they're commenting, they're interacting with the audience, but they're not involved in the dance itself.
Yeah.
I think that's partly because the Rapper over there is packed in pubs, and you can't do the more extravagant things we do over here with free space.
Oh, so it's a question of the place it's danced.
I think so. It originated in a pub, so everything's very tight. Yeah. And here we can be more a street theater.
But that must also have influenced the dance itself. The place that it's danced becomes tighter and tighter. It's like the Irish sets.
Oh, it could be. Like Harry said, yeah. Sure.
You're all like intensely focused on the center of the set practically.
Yeah. That's why I think you get the most expansive dances at all, like the fooling of Half Moon and their sword dance. I think that just doesn't go over in England because they're so used to it being tight, and also the spaces may not allow it. So I think they look at that extravagant use of space as being a very American thing. I think. I haven't talked to them enough to know, but I think they
like Orion you were talking about.
No, Orion's not fooling. No.
They're longsword.
Longsword, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anything you like, fooling, sure,
Yeah,
a little bit.
talk about fooling, like what you have observed in the teams that do have fools.
And what was important to you as a fool?
Well, I think.
Oh, you were a fool.
Yeah, with the
He was
rapper
a
only.
Superb fool.
Well,
Okay, we'll talk about that.
thank you. But,
I did not know.
One of my favorites.
So I think rapper and Morris fooling is very different. And that Morris fooling, I think you need the natural comic who's spontaneous. You need a John Maybury, who's brilliant John Maybury, or somebody like that who can pick up things on the fly going on with the audience. And I always found, Dan Popovich, a perfect, great, wonderful example. But I think rapper is very different. And I would be terrified of being a Morris fool. And I'm sure I do a horrible job at it. But rapper is more, you have to think in advance. Here's where to dance. This is your moment of opportunity. This is what you can do in the set here. This is what you can do there. And it's more planning as part of the choreography of the dance to do it. And I could do that. So I think the rapper fooling that we didn't know it at the time, what Tony was, the style he was kind of telling us was all coming from Monk Seton and Peter Brown, and or from Tony's point of view, Peter Brown's father, who he had known in the 60s and 70s. And everything was Peter Brown, the best rapper fool ever, anywhere.
Ever.
And he had a couple of very controversial weeks in Pinewoods, which I missed the first one. It was Peter. Bringing in some entirely different interpretations of rapper, what was coming from the northeast of England as opposed to what CDSS and EFDSS taught typically.
When was this?
1976, 77 or something like that. And then he came again like a decade later. But I missed that first one, but I guess it was just revolutionary. Just in speed, style, well, flipping was even new, and just the Betty performance. He was the most wonderful and outrageous Betty that you could possibly imagine. I remember I remember this quote clearly. Jack Jansen says, "I just always wanted to dance like Peter Brown," and I think a lot of people felt like that too. Yeah, they were the opinion. Now, young people, the team still exists, but. Young people now, their heroes are from Dart for the last 20 years. The Dancing England Rapper Tournament, the cool teams there, and those are the ones they envy. They don't even know who Monk Seton is, which is fine. Things change. But 70s and 80s, Monk Seton was the epitome of what rappers should be to us. And so you definitely, what you don't want to do, if you see somebody as wonderful as Peter, you don't want to copy him. You don't want to put anything that he does, but you just want to sort of say, "Oh, this is the general style."
How would you characterize
how would it be?
general?
Kind of well, Peter was a perfect example for me in that somebody who, like me, has the worst possible singing voice. It can actually be part of the act. Just out there bellowing and out of tune and everything. And I don't know if Peter is actually a good singer, but his Bettying wasn't. And I said, "Wow, I can do that. I can finally sing in public." And just being the outrageous, extravagant, crazy Betty, but trying also not to disrupt the set or you don't want to be the star of the show and take away from it, but trying to enhance the overall thing. And so it was all choreographed what I did, and I changed things during time. But and sometimes there's spontaneous interactions with the audience, but it was much more choreographed. That was what I could do because I'm not, like I said, the on-the-fly comic at all that you need to be in a Morris fool.
So, as an outsider, describe what the Betty character does.
Well, dresses up clearly. You're well, just like. From time immemorial, there have been comics who are men dressed as women. They're not in any way female impersonators, but part of the humor is a humor that just isn't funny now as a man dressed as a woman, which is intrinsically funny. Milton Berle in the 50s, it just, all these, and any time in all throughout the 19th century, and it was a stock character. So you're definitely not trying to be a woman in any way other than wearing ridiculous looking women's clothing, and being a little bit outrageous and loud, and nothing sophisticated about it. A couple of particular gimmicks. Bringing things through the set during a curly figure. People have done everything. Baby carriages, step ladders, unicycle riders, everything through the set. And when I had been in England, there was a man who ran a London marathon dressed in like a tuxedo, dressed as a formal waiter in hard shoes, carrying a tray of water glasses as a formal waiter, and he ran the entire marathon without spilling a drop. And I said, that is a frigging awesome sight gag. So what I did as my part was, what I would bring through the set would be a plate full of champagne glasses, full of champagne in air quotes, and go through without spilling a drop. And at the end, as the people walked off, the team would each take a champagne glass and drown it. And that was our walk off. So that was just one example of a sight gag.
Yeah.
May I add? Some of your comic genius came in the setup for it, where the dance is going on, and here's Rhett off on the side with the plate, with the glasses, opening a bottle, and the audience is watching him fill each of the glasses, and there's this slow dawning on the audience, like, oh my God, we know what he's going to try to do with that. So setting up this whole audience expectation of what you're about to see, so that when you finally go through the set, you would get this huge cheer from the audience when you came out the other side, because people were like, oh my God, he did it. So
that's one thing. And the other thing, let's see, breastplate. Do you know this one where you form a metal breastplate around, and then they often walk it around the set, meaning rotate it 360 degrees? To me, what I always wanted to do when I was dancing in the set and I wasn't Betty, I said, that guy is such a sitting duck. That person is a palette for the Betty to work havoc on. And so one of the things I would do is you had just enough time, I could lather up and give the guy a complete shave. That was one of the things I do. And there's another thing when I made a gag out of the flip would happen. The flip would happen because I was eating a banana and tossed a banana peel under, and the person would flip. That's like in a cartoon. And then I get up and I'd say, clean up, and I say, well, what do I do? What do I do with this banana? What do I do? And I look at number 3 and I said, here, hold this. And I jam it in their mouth. And it was a green banana, so it wouldn't fall apart. And sometimes that was Susan, and sometimes it was Jack and our other people. And then they would rotate around the set with a banana sticking out of their mouth, which got the audience laughing a lot. And that was, that's the kind of thing. You could never do that in England because you're not supposed to interact with the set at all. The set is not supposed to be part of the joke at all. Oh. And it's very heavily frowned on. It's like one of the biggest unwritten laws in England. You can't do that. So that was one difference there.
Another difference.
So those are just a couple of examples of the thing. And the calling on song, it used to be a traditional, these are the heroes that you're bringing on, you're telling about their exploits, and these are, I flipped on their heads and I kind of insulted them all instead. And these guys, and they're very good, and they had the confidence and didn't mind at all.
Is there another character that interacts with the rapper set? You talked about the Betty. You mentioned another character.
Tommy.
Yeah.
Greenwich Guard, we had a Tommy for 1984 was our biggest Greenwich Guard performance that went over well. We always showed up, and we had a Tommy then. And Tommy, in England, it's the dominant figure. Over here, it's much more subordinate to the Betty. So the Tommy was very much part of it, but he was kind of mute in a secondary part in our dance. And then, I don't know, and then there's been the Half Moon foolish dances, and I think that's it for rapper. They were huge, by the way. Yeah.
Any teams that Marlboro, any Morris teams have fools?
I think John Mayberry is still the last one standing, and Dan Popowich was the last great fool who stopped recently, and I think that's about it. I just don't see it coming back. I don't know why. I think it was actually Susan who said maybe it's because of English are born to pantomime or used to the pantomime shows, which isn't part of my experience and part of American culture, and maybe that's why it failed. And going back in Morris, Tony was always a fool. The first 2 years of Marlboro Women, Andy was that, and that's just hard to believe Marlboro with a, and yeah, they've gone by the wayside. I don't.
It seems like a tragic
understand
loss.
It is. And and the worst thing is to say, hey, we need a fool. You go do it. You have to want to do it.
Yes.
So when I was in Greenwich Guard, Ryan Boker in the 80s, he was lovely. He was a professional actor. We didn't tell him what to do. We just said, do whatever you want. And he did. And yet when I was in the set, the way I knew it, I was saying, oh, this is what I would do. No, I wouldn't do that. I would do this. Or, I said, here's an opportunity for this. And it's like this send me in, coach kind of thing. I knew I wanted to do it. And then Longmeadow, I had Longwood, I had my chance to do it.
Yeah. So a fool is born, not made, I would say.
And needs to be one of the stronger dancers.
Yeah. Or certainly don't do it.
You told me that, or
I'm not sure. I'm thinking about that. It makes sense, but
because if they need to move in and out of the set, they need to have a really good sense
when and how,
where those opportunities are, when and how to not disrupt the dance.
Right.
So you have to have a keen sense of the dance and be really on top of your place in that movement that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to talk about, Rhett?
Yeah, more than you want to hear, probably. So we're got to.
What rises to the top?
What rises to the top? Sure. Along with fooling, I guess what it reminded me of was interaction with the audience, which is one thing that the fool does. Yeah. And Tony was great. Tony was wonderful. Tony was just perfect in so many ways. I just can't say I could go on for that for a while, but let me just go on to the sense of interacting with the audience, and that's largely lost. Part of it with fooling. And I think, and then there's a stark contrast when the English teams, I'm thinking of Berkshire Bedlams and Great Western come over, Berkshire Bedlams and Great Western, or Outside Capering Crew, those three teams, they come over and they have a way of appreciating the audience, interacting that embarrasses, or should embarrass all of us. They're just so good at it. And we've just to a good extent lost it. I don't quite understand it. I wonder sometimes if the Marlboro Ale itself is responsible in some way, because of the geography of where we are, we're very used to going, we take it for granted that we're going up there, and sometimes we're dancing for ourselves, or it's the two teenagers going for a stroll and pretending you don't exist, or the old man walking the dog, and that's your stand. And I think in England, they want to dance for an audience, and they don't understand, why are you dancing for yourself? And, why do you want to go to such a small place? I don't think they get it. And when they do have a crowd, like those teams, like Berkshire, and they bring in the crowd, they interact, they're tailoring what they do for the crowd. It's not fooling in a way, but it's the same way of interacting as a performance. And I think Tony would have very much approved of everything they did. I don't know why. And that's the thing, the Ale Committee doesn't grasp, I don't think as a whole, that if you get an English team over, you put them where the biggest crowds are. Because that's what they want, and that's what they're going to like. The argument is always, people want to see bucolic Vermont, and they want to see the tiny villages or whatever, but I think the English teams want an audience to deal with. So one of the best tours I ever went on in probably late 80s with Longwood, my first years, they sent us to Mount Snow, which is a bit of a drive.
Oh, wow.
We went there, and it was wonderful because we were on an elevated platform, and there were hundreds of people, and they were laughing and cheering, and this was very rewarding. You get that feedback, dancing in front of a crowd and hearing the cheers. You're a ham on stage. You're just having a great time, and that was the only year, because the rest of the committee was saying, that's commercial. That's not what Morris is about. We're never going to go there again. And I was saying, I can see it. I see, people want to see beautiful Vermont, but there's something to be said for going for where the audience is. And I think a small step forward they did with that, when they're going to the Tourist Information Center on I-91. At least they get a good audience there. But to answer yourselves, is totally mystifies English. And we're so used to it at Marlboro because,
It's the geography, but also
Geography.
what is the American character of Morris that makes it okay? That makes it like different and okay to be doing it for yourself.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if other teams do. The teams from Boston, maybe that's not their experience during the year, or teams from big cities and Bowery Boys. I'm sure they're not dancing for themselves. But when they come up here, yeah, I guess it's to get a tour. It's small audience.
Yeah.
I guess the big thing is just an appreciation of how some of those English teams are just absolutely wonderful at it in a way that we don't have or should have. And then you get the outside caper and crew and. My goodness, okay, 4 jig dancers. They're the best dancers I've ever been to the Ale, the best showmen, the best of everything. In fact, my comment upon them to one of their emails is you can find it's their lead comment on their website. I sent one of them an email. I just said, you guys are the best athletes and best entertainers you've ever had the Ale in 50 years, and it's true. And Simon Pipe is probably he's probably the best individual Morris dancer for the last half century anywhere. He's won the Sidmouth jig competition like probably I'm guessing 3 times as often as the next leading person. He's just phenomenal, and 2 of the best. Well, we can always another subject who's been the best and memorable is another thing to get into. But it's a matter of fact.
So, just through your own filter, what have been the most memorable things in the context of dance at the Ale?
Let's see. Let me think of women's Cotswold. Okay, so Rapper and Sword changes, but Cotswold is very much the same along. It's timeless in a way, and that teams are good or bad in the 70s, 80s, 20s in a way that it doesn't evolve like Rapper and Longsword has. So I think the best women's dancing I've seen, I think Marlboro Women in the early 80s, and then Haypenny in the late 80s.
Oh, right.
The team, they went to, were they the first American Morris team to be showcased at Sidmouth? I'm not sure. There were Rapper teams before them. Swords of Gridlock was there before, but I don't know if they're the first Morris team to be showcased at Sidmouth.
Wow.
But they were they had their brief shining moment in the 80s, and if there were women dancers who I'd focus on, just even in a good set and say this is a person I want to watch, I'd say, okay, in 1980s it'd be like Julie Stevens on Marlboro.
Yeah.
I just watch her, just her capers were just, I mean not her capers, her galleys were just. Just unbelievable. They were spectacular to watch. I loved watching Julie. Yeah. And say late 80s, I'd say Sarah Henry doing Ascot under Witchwood for Ring of Bells.
Yeah.
And then Windsor Women, Sue Graham. Sue Graham, just the most, my goodness, most in shape Morris dancer, the biggest leaper. And Sue came back as 1/4 of outside caper and crew, and she and what's the name of the? I'm sorry, it's on the tip of my tongue. Tracy. She and Tracy were the highest leaping, most athletic women that have ever come to the Marlboro Ale. They were part of what made outside caper and crew so wonderful. So those are probably the women's teams. Men, Tony Barron was pretty damn perfect. Total control over his body, spectacular ability, but the thing you couldn't imitate about him though, he was built like a brick shit house. He was this pile of muscle, and he could just soar and jump, and just so much power. I think he called it power and grace. The power, who he could do, and the grace that he had, just exquisite control. I once said that grace just didn't seem right with Tony because he was just this male power, strength, but it didn't seem the right word, but he had it. Yeah, sure. And he was just pretty much perfect when he could dance, but you couldn't imitate him because you couldn't be him physically. And in the early Marlboro Men, Tim Cavanaugh had this wild, extravagant, individual style. I just loved watching Tim Cavanaugh. It's maybe my favorite entertaining person to watch. And but again, it was his individual thing. I mean, nothing you could emulate. You just appreciate it. And as far as men's teams, I'd say over the years, what John Dexter would do, Bowery Boys, they've been the best as a whole team.
Wow.
And then musicians. I don't mean music, but a musician to watch. Alan Weir, Whear, who came from Windsor. Oh, you would know that. Yeah, not many people remember him, but they were doing some great dancing. But you just watch this guy play the box with his whole body and the sound he got of it. It's just I think I wrote him once as the most entertaining musician ever, and he just nobody's ever been quite like Alan. Mm-hmm. Do you have time for a funny music story?
Yeah.
Anecdote. Going back to Juggler Meadow again. I think it's late 80s. Maybe it was a frog year, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But their founder was, Johnny Appleseed, Roger Cartwright, yeah.
Oh, right.
So for some reason, Roger wasn't supposed to be part of their show dance at Newtown. And they went out to do their show dance. But Roger, he took offense at that. I don't know the details. But he came out of the crowd to play also. And the problem was he had a key he wanted to play in. Oh. And the real musician, he had a key he wanted to play on. Oh. So we see there's the dance going, and after the first figure, Roger comes out and starts playing the same tune in a different key. And it's like, it is the fingernails on a chalkboard.
Yeah,
and
I'm feeling it.
Okay, so John Roberts on his box thinks this is hysterical. So he comes out and starts playing in a third key. And Andy Horton thinks this is really great. I'm in the act too. So she gets out and playing in a fourth key. So it's this oh my God, this caterwauling, these individually great musicians deliberately, the caterwauling, awful, awful sound. And we're in hysterics. We think it's part of the gig. For them, it wasn't funny at all. It was an internal team dynamic, and I think it was their personal nightmare, especially that we were all laughing at them when it was, because it looked like the perfect setup gag to us, but it wasn't. But anyway, it's just a very memorable moment.
Oh my! Poor Juggler Meadow, man.
Anyway,
just like they couldn't win, Interesting. What time is it?
It is 12:20.
Oh my goodness. We have an hour and a half. We're an hour and a half in. That's a lot.
I think we should wrap up.
Sure.
And you have been saying along, I could talk for a long time on any of these topics, and I know you probably did you bring up everything
we've covered
that you...
a lot. Let's see. Is there